Greetings, y'all. Welcome to another video. I'm your host, Steve. That's right. If you didn't get it by the name of the video, now you know. Who's this Steve of the music collection? It is me of the music collection. Anyways, I don't know why. Sometimes I don't know what the hell I'm thinking sometimes when I do these little intros. But today we're going to talk about the band Asia from the 80s, the supergroup. Kind of got kind of a bad rap later on in their career, especially I think after that movie, The 40-Year-Old Virgin, kind of took a little swipe at them, kind of made fun of them. But they were a good band in the 80s, and I know their history. There's been tons of different incarnations of the band. I just kind of fair warning, I jumped ship pretty quick after that original band kind of faded away. And I know there's tons and tons of records that they have. And the original band even reunited, I think, in the 2000s or something like that, and put out a couple of new records. And I think I heard like one or two songs from those, and nothing really kind of caught my ear that made me want to go out and pick them up or anything. But I think at this point there might be like one or two dudes still from the original band still out there touring under that moniker. And I think at one point it was even one of those scenarios where there were like two different versions of the band touring at the same time. I don't know. It's a little confusing, I guess, to somebody who hasn't really followed them. But like I said, I like the band in the 80s. And speaking of that 40-year-old version, the joke is like the guy's got like a frame poster of their first album. And I remember but again, I wasn't 40. I was, I don't know, like 13 or something. I remember having the poster of their second album up on my wall. But yeah, so, let's just dive in. My small collection of Asia CDs. First up, obviously, is their self-titled debut. This came out in 82. Kind of, I mean, they made fun of the art, the band or whatever, but the artwork's kind of cool. This guy, Roger Dean, I guess he did a lot of the artwork for Yes, and some of these dudes from Asia were in Yes, involved with Yes. So I guess it wasn't a big shocker that they got him to do their artwork for their album. But this was just, in 82, just massive. Not a whole lot to the booklet. I'm sure, I wouldn't be surprised if this has been like remastered and reissued, maybe with a better booklet with more liner notes and stuff like that in it. But this I got, who knows when, in the 90s, probably early 90s or late 80s on CD. But again, like I was saying, this was just a massive seller. I think mostly just the album sold a ton. The singles there were like one or two did pretty good, but it wasn't so much that the singles were massive hits. I think it was more just the album itself sold a ton of copies. And I think it just, I mean, it was a super group. These guys had all come from different successful projects, but I still think it was kind of a bit of a surprise that this did as well as it did. I mean, this was massive. You cannot understate how big this record was back in 1982. And it's good, I mean, there's elements, they mostly, a lot of them come from like a prog rock background. So there's elements of that in it, but it also has kind of just like mainstream rock, little bit of pop, elements to it, which obviously I think played into the success of the record. But Heat of the Moment was the big single from this, and it's a great song, holds up. Only Time Will Tell I remember really liking. Soul Survivor, One Step Closer, Time Again, Wildest Dreams I kind of remember. Here Comes a Feeling. Yeah, it's a good record. It's pretty solid, I guess the anticipation of how they would follow this up. I don't know how the tour did. If they toured, I'm sure they toured behind this. I don't know how well the tour went, but I know there was, after an album this big, the anticipation for the follow-up, was pretty sky high. So in 1983, we get their follow-up. We get Alpha. And this is the artwork that I had the poster of on my wall. I really like this. Again, this is Roger Dean returning to do the album artwork. But I always thought that was a really cool image there, and it kind of continues on the back. So the first thing I heard from this record, and I don't know that I had the first Asia. I think my sister had the LP, the vinyl, and which I think I inherited years later. But I don't think I didn't have that album or cassette or anything back when it came out. But I remember hearing the first single from this, which was "Don't Cry," and I loved that song. I still love it. I still think it's a great, great rock song, and I remember going out and picking up the, let's see, this is essentially what my poster looked like, but I remember going out and picking up a 12-inch import I found in the record store of "Don't Cry," and then it had, I think, 2 other tracks on it, maybe like the B-side or whatever the single was, and then maybe a third I think it was like a third non-LP track. I think it was called Daylight, actually. But I picked up that 12-inch. I loved that song. And then when this came out, this album, I picked up the vinyl. I had the vinyl of this record. And I liked it. But, it's funny. I loved Don't Cry, and I like this band, but I don't know that I listened to their albums like through and through all that much. But this album comes out, like I said, the anticipation for this record following this massive selling album, and this is kind of viewed as a bit of a flop, a bit of a disappointment. It didn't equal that first record by a long shot. Don't Cry did pretty well on the charts, top 40 charts, maybe getting into the top 10, but that was kind of it. The album didn't sell that well. I think the band started fracturing at that point. I don't know tour-wise what they did behind this record. They might have brought in some other guys to replace. Jeff Downes was the keyboard player. He wrote a lot of songs. Steve Howe did guitars. Carl Palmer was drums. And John Wetton was the vocals and played bass. I feel like when they went on tour for this record, Steve Howe kind of bailed. I think they had to get a replacement guitar player. I think I remember hearing that. I'm not sure. But the album's not bad. It's got some good songs on it besides Don't Cry. Smile Has Left Your Eyes, I really like. It's kind of a ballad. Never in a Million Years was really good. My Own Time, The Heat Goes On was really good. Might have been released as a single. The rest of the ones I'm not too familiar with. It's funny, like both of these records, I kind of feel like on vinyl, like the first side I really liked, and then the second side I kind of lost interest in. But yeah, this was not a bad record. And then a couple years goes by, like I said, lineup changes a little bit. 1985 gives us their third album, Astra. The first single from this was Go, and it did okay. I think it barely cracked the top 40, or maybe just missed the top 40. I liked that song, though, when it came out. I remember kind of liking the video as well. But this album, there was really little interest in this album when it came out. I remember when it came out, I remember kind of anticipating it and going and picking it up the day that it came out. Picked it up on vinyl when it first was released, and thought it was pretty good. Again, another Roger Dean creation for the album cover. I like this one too. I remember always trying to like draw this image here, kind of copying it. But this album was sort of kind of dead on arrival to a degree. Like I said, Go did all right, but that after that single kind of ran its course on the top 40 or in the Billboard chart, the album kind of was done. But it's not bad. I kind of like a couple other tunes on here. Voice of America, I remember liking. Hard on Me, I thought was pretty good. Wishing was okay. But again, it just, a handful of tunes and then half of an album I'm not that crazy about. And like I mentioned, Steve Howe kind of jumped ship and was replaced by Mandy Meyer, who I think came from like more of a heavy metal background. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure he was in like sort of like a heavy metal band before this. Was it Crocus? I want to say Crocus, but I could be wrong. I'm not that up on all that stuff. But yeah, so this came out, and I think pretty much everybody assumed that's it. That's the end of Asia. And then 5 years goes by. I think they had like one or two like offshoot songs like on soundtracks or something that, who knows who was even involved with making those, if it was, just maybe one or two guys. But 5 years goes by, and kind of, I remember, I used to read Billboard magazine a lot back then, and this, I feel like it kind of just came out of nowhere. Suddenly in 1990, they release a quasi best of new music album called Then and Now, appropriately titled Then and Now. And the first track from this, I remember hearing the single that they released called Days Like These, which is a really good song. Sounds right in line with the stuff they did previously in the 80s. I really liked that song. Bought this probably the day it came out on CD. This is it. I don't know if I initially knew it was going to be like a greatest hits record, but obviously when I saw the album, obviously it was. It's, the new tracks are okay. Days Like These is good. Then the other new tracks are Praying for a Miracle, Am I in Love, Summer Can't Last Too Long. They're okay. Days Like These is obviously the highlight of this record. And like I mentioned, Steve Howe is gone. Mandy Meyer, I think he's not even, maybe he's on a couple of these tracks. I feel like the new tracks all had like different guitar players on them. And this artwork is not Roger Dean. They used elements of Roger Dean's previous work, but someone else did this art for the album, did this like kind of horse. And I never was a big fan of this album artwork. I kind of felt it was like, it was like a poor man's version of Roger Dean. It wasn't very inspired or anything. I don't know why, if it was like a money issue, I don't know why they wouldn't have asked him to come back to do the artwork. I'm sure he was still alive. I don't think it was a case that he was no longer with us, but yeah, it's just kind of a cheap looking version of someone trying to kind of mimic his style, and not that good of a job. I think for a while I even, like, when there was like artwork I didn't like, if there was something else, I would sometimes flip it around. I think for a long time I had this flipped around so that looked like the album cover or whatever, but stupid. But yeah, and then the other tracks on here, Only Time Will Tell, Heat of the Moment, Don't Cry, Smiles Up Your Eyes, the big songs from their back catalog. But that's it. That's all I had. And like I said, after Then and Now, suddenly there's all these different versions of Asia. It might have even happened before Then and Now came out. I don't even remember, but just splintered off. New lead singer, different guitar players, maybe different drummers, etc., until many, many, many years later, when the original four guys get back together and put out some reunion albums. And then again, the band started fracturing. And I believe John went and he passed away a few years ago. So, you think that would kind of, end the Asia story, but I know they've carried on with other people, so yeah, let me know what you think of Asia, and if you ever got to see them live, especially back in the 80s, be kind of interesting to hear. But yeah, that's it. I'm sure, some of you out there are just kind of like, oh, that's it, like you probably have massive collections of all their albums, but I'd be curious to hear other people's thoughts on them and some of those other records and those different incarnations of the band. So let me know. And thanks for watching, and see you another time. See you later, y'all.